This
started.
conference will now be recorded.
There you go, that this conference will be recorded. And the primary reason is really so that I can review it and identify things that I may want to expand upon in future meetings. And I'll review the quality, and either the slides will be posted at a later date, or if the recording is good, then the whole entire recording will be posted. So and I'm not sure which at this point yet, but something. And certainly I'm always willing to talk about water. I also want to let everybody know that I am actually going to go ahead and I'm going to try to mute your microphone. So I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do it right this second. There we go. I am going to go ahead and mute all of you. And my reason for that is not that I don't want to hear what you have to say, because I do, but it's just that tonight I do want to make sure that I give a presentation out to you, and then I will be asking for follow-up questions, comments, things that you'd like to hear more about, things that maybe were confusing. So I will be giving my email, and that's really the best way, and I'll make sure that we follow up. Again, to be decided whether it's best to follow up with a constant contact email out or post it, or whether we'll discuss it at the next water meeting. So moving along, I would like to be able to, hold on, let me make sure I got my screen all done. I'd like to be able to introduce my water committee members. And I'm the chair of the Allendale Water Committee for 2020. And alongside of me is my fellow council member, Steve Sasso. And we also have Ari Bernstein, our mayor. And Ron Kistner, our director of operations, is excellent. He helps coordinate and facilitate and does a lot of the interaction with Suez, which is, very extensive, obviously, because water is such an important resource. So Ron is day to day very involved in the water. Alyssa Mayer is our water collector, and that's super important because the water utility is a completely separate budget, and it needs to be self-funding. And you can imagine with some of the infrastructure upgrades and repairs when there's water main breaks and all those types of things, it's not a small job to keep our finances on an even plane and make sure that our rate increases are manageable, and she does a great job. She's also our Allendale CFO. Mike Vreeland is our borough engineer, and he also is a part of the Allendale Water Committee. He works for Van Cleef Engineering and has been retained as our borough engineer and is a huge help. And Lane Simon is on our DPW. He also has many water licenses himself, and he's a tremendous resource. And I like to say that Lane is also the amazing Allendale water historian, because I have learned so much about him from him, not only about water and our infrastructure, but also the history of much of the Allendale water. I mean, you can stop and ask him about a particular pipe on a street, and he'll probably remember when it was put in and when it was repaved and all those types of things. So many times as residents, you may see Lane driving around in his DPW truck. He might be tagging or maintaining a curb box or one of our many fire hydrants. So I thought it'd be fun to have a picture of Lane in the presentation, because he's great out and about in the town. So my meeting mission tonight. Tonight, I would like to share with all of you about several things. The Allendale water itself and the system components, our working relationship with Suez, our Allendale water utilization, the use of water restrictions as we had this summer. And I'm happy to say, hopefully everybody knows that we are off of really the restrictions. We are now back to operating at phase 1, which is really the way we operate all the time. So I was thinking we probably need to rename it from phase 1 permanent restrictions to something more positive, like permanent conservation initiatives. But really, they're not restrictive at all, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We're also going to talk about the water quality. I think it's super important that Allendale residents do feel good about the quality of their water. There's a consumer confidence report that I'll show you where it is on the borough website. I'll also take you to the NJ Water Watch site, which is set up by the NJ DEP, and it actually shows all of the quality tests that we do. It's not something that I would think you would peruse on a regular basis, but I feel like it's a good thing for me to show you so that you feel comfortable about all of the tests that Allendale and all the state of New Jersey requires. So we'll go into that. And at the end, I will remind you again to email me questions, because it's important to me that you learn as much as you want to learn about Allendale Water. So let's start with, where does Allendale Water come from? 50% of the water that we have here in Allendale comes from our very own wells. Those wells tap into the Brunswick aquifer. So do many of the other wells that are in the area. So we're all pulling from those wells, and certainly they need time to recharge. So 50% of our water we pump ourselves from our own wells. The other 50% is water that we purchase from Suez, and we have a bulk water contract, so that's the legal document that we have. That water from Suez comes from various reservoirs and is treated in their Harworth facility. And I'm actually going to show you in a little map where it comes into Allendale through Saddle River. But that is surface water versus the well water that Allendale produces. Just as a note, we do have two emergency interconnects, one with Ridgewood Water on the Wyckoff side, and we have connections with Ramsey on our Ramsey border. And just as a whole, thinking about our water, Allendale uses about 350 million gallons of water a year. So it's not a small amount of water. Our infrastructure. Allendale we own our own infrastructure, and that's quite a bit of stuff. We have 5 wells. We have a 400,000 gallon raised water tank, which is actually located in Ramsey, and I'll show you that on our little map. We have a 1 million gallon ground level tank that is over near Fairhaven. We have a new street treatment plant that treats wells 2, 4, and 15. And then we have a Meeker treatment plant that treats well number 17. The West Crescent treatment plant is well number 11. And then we own all of the pipes and the valves and the hydrants in the streets, as well as the curb boxes. And then we do also own a little bit over 2,600 meters that are used in residential and commercial, and some sprinklers that are used throughout Allendale. So it's not a small amount of stuff. Allendale is unique in the Northwest Bergen area, that we own our infrastructure and we have a operation and management contract with Suez to operate and manage our water system. Some of our surrounding towns have a different setup. So like Ramsey and Waldwick, they do own both their infrastructure and they have their own employees that manage that. Wyckoff, Midland Park, Glen Rock, they do not own their water utility. That is run by Ridgewood Water. Upper Saddle River, and Franklin Lakes have many residences that are on well water, their own well water. The ones that are not are served by Suez. So, we're kind of in a unique situation. And I'm going to just show you, I'm going to exit out for a second just because it's easier. And I'm going to show you the map of Allendale. And on here, you can see this is the northern part of Allendale. Here's our elevated tank in Ramsey. And then over here, the other blue disc is the 1 million gallon tank, ground tank that's in Fairhaven. And then you can see there's well number 17 and the Meeker water treatment plant on the north side. And then if you come down to the southern part of Allendale, this is where we have the West Crescent treatment plant and well number 11, the 3 wells and the New Street treatment plant. And all of these different colors that are showing up on the maps wiggling around, those are all of the different mains. So that's what the piping is through the streets that you can see. So it's a great little system. And I just thought you might like to get a picture of what it actually looked like, because I think it's really interesting. Let's go back to the presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the residents own. So residents own a portion of the service line. The total service line, the water service line, goes from the main, which is what I showed you in that previous map, the different color pipes that are in the streets. The service line goes from there and connects to a curb box on the resident's property. From that curb box into the home is the resident's responsibility at all times. So that's, you know, as a homeowner or a say individual renting to somebody or a business owner, they own from the curb box into the dwelling area. The side from the curb box out to the water main mainly is Allendale's responsibility, but there are a couple of times where that would not be the case, and I just want to make sure people are aware of that. If a service is being renewed, meaning that from the curb box all the way into the house, saying that somebody goes from they put in additional bathrooms, and so they want to have more water coming into their home, and they go from a 3/4 inch customer service line to a 1 inch, they will be responsible for upgrading that service all the way to the curb box. Additionally, so any new service line, or if you're lucky enough to get a new home, you would have to upgrade it all the way to the main. Additionally, if there is work done on your premise that involves utilizing the curb box and there is damage during that time, that would also be the responsibility of the resident. So this is just a little snippet of our Allendale code that shows where that responsibility is defined. So let's talk about the operation and management with Suez. You know, as I said that, at least I think I said, maybe I didn't, that Allendale's water department started in 1930 under Mayor Thomas. He began the water department in 1930, starting to dig wells and have treatment facilities and all those types of things. So we've had our water department since 1930. Prior to that, in 1914, we did start taking water from Ramsey. So some of the pipes can be as old as 1914 coming, when we started taking water from Ramsey. And obviously the towns around us are in the same situation that, we have some pipes that have been there for quite some time. So that's why sometimes the investment into our infrastructure is needed to replace and maintain. But in 2013, we decided to have, at that time it was United Water, take over the operation and management of our water department. Again, we own everything, they operate and maintain. In 2018, when I first came on to the water committee as the chair, we signed our second 5-year agreement with Suez. And we also have a bulk water agreement with Suez, as I talked about earlier. So we do have a very good working relationship. I feel like over the last 3 years, we've had challenges, but we've also, I think, really improved our coordination and our working together, which has been great. The benefits of working with Suez and not actually having our own department fall into a couple of categories. First of all, they are a great partner to manage the increased testing and the oversight to remain compliant with the DEP quality testing requirements. As I spoke of earlier, there are an awful lot of testing that's required, and we as residents should love that because we want to have high quality water. You know, when people drink bottled water, I often say to them, like, do you know what type of quality testing they've gone through? Because they may only have to follow they may only be following the EPA rules. And New Jersey has many more stringent quality requirements. But in order to, to be compliant with all those, it's challenging. And having Suez as a partner is very helpful. Additionally, when we do have water main breaks, Suez has a large number of workers that can come and help us.
I think you should listen.
Help us particularly when we have a main break in an area that is. I'm going to try to mute everybody. Please, everybody, try to make sure I think you all should be muted, but it will be helpful if we have everybody on mute. Whoops, don't want to leave you guys. So the quick response to the water main breaks is also a benefit that we have with Suez. Additionally, we have a couple years ago, the Water Accountability Act came in, which is a little bit different than all of the quality testing. It's things like making sure that we have every valve that is in the borough opened and closed to make sure that if there is a main break, that we can turn off water appropriately, and making sure that every one of our fire hydrants are tagged, everyone's been exercised. So there's a lot of tasks that need to be done, and Suez is also a good partner in making sure that we remain compliant with the Water Accountability Act. Retaining ownership of our facilities does give us the opportunity to have leverage over Suez's performance. So, the fact that this water committee interacts so closely with Suez, we can represent concerns that residents may have and concerns that we as a borough have. So I feel like that has been very positive in this different relationship of owning the infrastructure and yet having Suez be the operation and management. There certainly are challenges with owning your infrastructure, and I think as residents, you all need to be aware of what those challenges are. And when I share them, they are pretty common sense, but it's probably not something we always think about. Number one, the biggest one is probably the cost of maintaining the infrastructure. As I said, ourselves and all the towns around us, we have aging infrastructure. So things need to be replaced. The elevated tanks need to be painted. We've needed to, refurbish them. That costs a lot of money. So owning that infrastructure, that is all on us. Additionally, we talked about it earlier, the costs of increased testing and new treatment options that will be necessary in the future. And I have a little note down here about these PFAS compounds, which I've talked about each and every time in our water, in my committee reports at the council meetings. PFASs are compounds that have become important to begin looking at in water, and it's important that our committee and our borough begin looking at how, if necessary, would we treat these particular compounds. So that's definitely a challenge for the future. And then the third challenge, and I feel like my water committee would understand this very well, is there is obviously a tremendous amount of time that is spent because we do give oversight to the operation and management of the Suez agreement. And we do spend a lot of time making sure that things are done correctly and that our residents are well served. So what's the future? The future comes in a couple of things I felt was important to share with each of you. We have been conducting a feasibility study by an engineering firm, it's Mott MacDonald, to understand some of the options and the costs of future treatment needs, specifically looking at these PFAS compounds. These are big undertakings. To put in a treatment facility for 4 out of our 5 wells will probably cost just under about $3 million. So that's stuff that we needed to be exploring and thinking about. And I feel like the residents of Allendale need to be aware that we are thinking forward, because that's important and that should feel good. At that same time, thinking about the costs of some of these things, it's important that we evaluate the value of our system. So some towns, municipalities have opted to sell their entire system to a corporate, to a corporate utility. And so that's something that we need to look at. What is the value of our system? Would that be something that would make sense to do? And so would we put out an RFP around that? And to that point, and the reason for me wanting to have these meetings is I want to try to understand what the desires are of Allendale residents. The cost for this valuable water resource is going to increase no matter what happens. If we, keeping our own water system, we need to invest in the upkeep. If somebody else were to be owning and running our water system, the investment still needs to be made. And so I really implore residents that are interested to become educated and to talk to myself and to the other members of the water committee, because it's important that we have a dialogue, and it's just such an important resource to preserve and be aware of. Let's talk about our water restrictions. We do operate on permanent phase 1 water restrictions. I don't like that name. They are really the implementation of water conservation initiatives, and it's very simple. Each resident can water 3 days a week. They are assigned by even and odd numbers. I don't need to read it to you. And most importantly, Monday is always a recharge day. And I'm going to show you a chart as to why that is important. You don't have to get up close to your computer and try to look at the X and Y axis. I'll just tell you that this is million gallons on the Y axis, and this is time going forward on the X axis. And what's important is really just to look at this upward slope. This goes from February through to, I'm going to show you right here in June, which is about when we put in the phase 2 water restrictions. And you can see that we normally use, I don't know, somewhere around 300, let's say 360,000 gallons a day. We were up to using almost 1.6 million gallons a day when we went into the phase 2 water restrictions on June 27th. And that was because we were in drought conditions, and we needed to make sure that our wells were having an opportunity to recharge. We needed to make sure that our pumps were having an opportunity to be turned off. And we also are limited by the amount of water that we can pump from our wells. So we went on those phase 2 water restrictions, and I want to show you how well the recharge day works. Again, don't need to get caught up in the details. I've highlighted the important parts. These are nighttime hours when watering goes on. And this is a level of the water in the elevated Ramsey tank. And so at nighttime, when the sprinklers, the automatic sprinklers are all going off, the water level goes down because so much water is being pulled out. That's totally fine as long as it's, managed. But it's important that we have that Monday recharge day. So what you see here is this is actually Saturday, Sunday, and that blue circle is Monday. And you can see that we don't have that huge drop. So that's why it's important that you set your sprinkler so that they are, watering 3 days a week on your appropriate day. And that way, no one day gets stressed too much. The Mondays, we have the opportunity for the system to recharge. So I thought it'd be cool for people to actually see how well it works. We do not need to go into phase 3. I'd originally had this presentation started when we were in phase 2. If you remember, it was going to be during the storm. And we have actually, moved back to phase 1. So we're good. So people can have slip and slides if they want outside. They can wash their car. You can power wash your driveway, power wash your house. So feel free to operate as needed. I now would like to talk about our water quality and the consumer confidence reports. And the idea of the consumer confidence report is really to share the quality of our water. And I feel really good about it. So what I'm going to try to do right now is hopefully click over to our website. Wait for a moment. And if you go into the departments and you go down to water, you can then see right here, we have the consumer confidence reports, and it's each year. So in 2020, we post the year prior's information. And so you can click on that, hopefully. And here it comes from Suez, since they manage our stuff. They talk about all the things I've talked about, the introduction, where the sourcing is, bottle versus tap. But then it comes into all of these 2019 quality results. And so if you ever have a concern or you're interested, you certainly can be able to go into this. Here you can see this, yes, is where we had the tetrachloroethylene issue with one of our strippers, which is a piece of machinery that works at the New Street plant. And so we had to have that fixed. And I am pleased to say that we have been at non-detect since the time that that machine has been fixed. So we can all feel good about that. I know that you received several mailings, and that's because, again, the NJDEP wants to make sure that you're aware that we have fixed this violation and that things are at a non-detect level. So that is the report here. You can see everything else looks great. And I encourage you at any time to be able to go in and review that. The next thing that I'd like to show you, and again, this one you may not want to go in as often, but this is the New Jersey Drinking Water Watch, and our system is Allendale. And I want to show you this because this gives an indication of all, I'm just going to look at all of the contaminant names that we test for. So here you can see these are all of the contaminants that New Jersey requires that we are measuring and testing for. And really it's quite an extensive list. And that's, again, the reason why it's great to be able to work with Suez. But I felt like also it's something that's important to myself as a consumer of Allendale water, that you know that these are all the things that are expected to be in compliance. So hopefully that was helpful. And again, if you have any questions, I want you to make sure you always ask me. When I think about a focus on water, you do have some responsibilities. If you have filters in your home, I'd like to encourage you to make sure that you change them on time. Most of them are carbon-based filters, and carbon works through the process of absorption. They have little sites, and the pore structures capture anything that that it wants to filter out. And so you do need to make sure that those are changed on a regular basis. If you drink bottled water, I would challenge you to get the water quality report to see what type of testing they are actually doing. Because being a recycling person, I'd really be happy if I could encourage everybody to drink Allendale water and make sure you put it in your reusable water bottles so that we also don't have so much plastic floating around. The other thing that I'd like to ask you to do is to review your water bills. It says on your water bill if it's an actual or an estimate. And if it's an estimate, that means that your meter needs to be looked at. So I would encourage you to contact Suez. The number is right on the bill, or you can contact myself or the borough and we'll direct you where to go. When you're looking at your bill, if you're feeling like, whoa, that's a lot bigger, it says it's, a 50% larger number than last year, you really need to take the time to look around. Do you have dripping sinks? Do you have running toilets? Do you have broken sprinkler heads? And the biggest offender of all, do you have a malfunctioning sump pump? Some people do have water-driven sump pumps, and if that would happen to be malfunctioning, the way it might work is that it may draw an awful lot of water through it. So if you have a water-driven sump pump, they all should be actually reviewed yearly. But also, I would just encourage you to make sure you know what that might sound like when it's running. Because one of the things that's challenging for me, and I know the rest of the water committee feels the same way, is that when people don't take care of the dripping sink, the running toilet, the broken sprinkler heads, many times they can have a very large water bill. And one of the things we can't do in advocating for the residents is forgive water bills, because if it's metered through your property, it needs to be paid for, because as I said, it's a utility that's self-funding. So if somebody's forgiven for a very large water bill, really their next door neighbor is paying for it. So that's, it's hard, but I ask you again to make sure you do get your bills quarterly. Make sure you take a look at them. If you see water running in the street or in the yard, it is important that you give a call to the non-emergency police number, or you can call Suez directly and we'll make sure it's checked out, because certainly we do have water main breaks, particularly when there's a freeze thaw cycle. So those are things I'd like to ask, residents to do on a regular basis. From our side, you have the Suez team that's working 24/7, and I can say they definitely care about quality water. And the Allendale Water Committee, we do spend a lot of time. I love hearing from you guys. So please, let's all work together and conserve and protect and share this natural resource. So with that, that's all that's not all, but that's what I wanted to try to share today, which I hope was interesting and kind of gave you a basis for the Allendale water system to build upon. And I will ask that you all email me, what you thought of this, what type of questions you have, what you'd like to hear of in the future. And that's all I have in 30 minutes. So you can either unmute and give me a yay, or you can just sign off.
Great job!
Good job, Liz. Nice.
Very
Hey,
important,
Liz.
very professional,
This-
very educational. Yes.
Hi, Liz. This is Bill Pilkington. I live at 12 Ethel Ave, and I have a couple of questions. First, I'd like to say that I thought your presentation was very well done, so thank you. But I do have two questions. I put them in the chat box. One has to do with who's responsible for enforcing water restrictions when we are on them. The reason I ask this, I'm out around 5 o'clock every morning, and I see certain properties that have their automated sprinklers on every day. And they're on main streets, such as Crescent Avenue. So who's responsible for enforcing the water restriction when we are on them?
All right. So, and I'm gonna say I will answer this, because I do think this is a simple answer. I am not going to take a whole host of questions tonight, primarily because I'm not a water engineer. So some things I would feel maybe uncomfortable answering. This one, I can say, we have the police that are aware of our ordinances, and they can and do drive around and will contact residents, at a decent hour, not at 5 o'clock in the morning. But I encourage you, it's not a tattletaling thing to be able to email myself or the borough and say, hey, I happen to notice that, 81 Dale Ave, which is where I live, that, their sprinkler is going off, every single day, because sometimes people just don't know, and they're not reading their emails, and they're just not aware. So the police are in charge, and then we also have Mike Limatola, who is our code enforcement officer. So yeah, hope that helps. But yes, and we should, and I see your next question, so maybe I won't have to read it. I will talk about that. Your question is around the tetrachloroethylene violation and the notification. Yes. So, this was really a tough one for me as being the chair of the water committee. We didn't know right away. So the way that the tetrachloroethylene measurement runs is that it's a running annual average. So you only go out of compliance once you are over a annual level. So, and this is how there's been changes made at Suez where there now is a dashboard, because the stripper that actually, was removed, it's a very simpler, it's a bubbler, it's simple to remove these VOCs, but it wasn't, it was misaligned because it was misaligned. And so we should have had a clue prior to that, prior to having the actual violation. And now.
Well, you should have had three. You should have had 3 tests that showed you were high, because it is a running average. So you had to have multiple tests that were high prior to having an official violation.
So so it is done quarterly, and yes, there should have been a trigger that should have triggered. We were not in violation until the 3rd quarter, and now there is a system put in place to be able to look at trends. And that's, so I can only say that was unfortunate, and my apologies, but that's something, sometimes you work through a problem as a problem emerges. So I feel good about the progress that we made from that situation. I don't feel at all good about the situation occurring. But, hopefully the letters, helped people understand what had happened and, where we were. And, that it was one site. We have water coming in from multiple sites. Hopefully you were able to attend. We had a public meeting where Suez came and really did a nice job of answering anybody's questions and explaining the technicalities, which I can't get into again because I'm not a water engineer. But hopefully.
My concern would be we were consuming water from the tap that was in violation for months before we were notified.
So I'm going to respectfully say I'm not going to continue on this discussion, because we were only in violation at that time. As soon as we were able to notify, we did so. The NJDEP and Suez and Allendale Water Department have, really tried to ensure that this was taken care of, and we have, and the non-detect results have continued. So I don't know if anybody else wants to email me questions. I am absolutely willing to answer those. And I will, as I said, I will compile those questions and share them. And you can send me an email on your opinion on how you'd like it shared. We haven't discussed that as a water committee yet, how we'll follow up. I'd like to have future water meetings like this to talk about, things more in depth. So please do email me, and thanks so much to everybody. Bye.
Good job. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye, Liz. Good job, Liz.
Bye.
Hi, Liz.
Bye,
Thanks.
Liz. Thank
Bye,
you.
Liz.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
Liz. Great job.
Thank you.
Very
Thanks
informative.
so much.
William Pilkington.